My name is Rachel, and I spent 6 years working 3 jobs to make ends meet while my parents funded my brother's entrepreneurial journey that never went anywhere. The day I finally became VP of marketing, they didn't even show up to my celebration dinner because my brother needed help moving into his new apartment, the fourth one they'd paid for in 2 years. What happened next changed our family dynamic forever and taught me the hardest lesson about self-worth I never knew I needed to learn. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I was the first one to arrive at the morning cup every day. 5 kg, 6 days a week, I'd unlock the cafe door, flip on the lights, and start brewing the first pots of coffee before the early rush of commuters began trickling in. By 1 p.m., I'd hang up my apron, rush across town to the marketing firm, where I worked as an associate strategist, and then pick up evening shifts at a local restaurant 3 nights a week. Some days I barely had time to breathe, let alone eat or rest properly. This wasn't the life I had imagined for myself when I graduated with honors and a marketing degree 4 years earlier. Back then, I'd been full of ambition and plans. But a recession hit just as I entered the job market, and what should have been entry-level positions with livable wages became unpaid internships and part-time roles that barely covered my student loan payments. Unlike many of my peers who moved back home to weather the economic storm, I refused to return to my parents' house in Oak Ridge. It wasn't pride that kept me away. It was self-preservation. Growing up as Jason's sister had taught me that in the Matthews household, there was a golden child, and then there was me. Jason was 3 years younger, but seemed to exist in a different universe of parental expectations. Where my report cards needed to be perfect, his passing grades were celebrated. Where my college acceptance came with reminders about scholarship requirements, his decision to take time to find himself after high school was supported with both encouragement and a monthly allowance that exceeded my first salary. My phone buzzed as I was wiping down tables before the morning rush. Mom. I hesitated before answering. Rachel, honey, I'm glad I caught you, she said, her voice bright with excitement that I knew instinctively wasn't about me. Jason has the most amazing news. I wedged the phone between my ear and shoulder, continuing to prepare the cafe for opening. What's up? He's finally figured it out. He's going to launch a tech startup focusing on, well, I don't quite understand all the details, but it sounds very innovative. Something about connecting local artists with organic coffee suppliers through blockchain? Your father and I are so proud. The familiar weight settled in my chest. Jason's big ideas came every few months, each one heralded as the breakthrough that would launch him into success. None had materialized into anything beyond elaborate presentations and requests for seed money from our parents. That sounds interesting, I managed, glancing at the clock. Mom, I need to open the cafe in 5 minutes. Can I call you later? Oh, your father and I are having dinner with Jason tonight to discuss his business plan and initial investment needs. He's thinking about taking an entrepreneurship course at the community college, and we want to help with that too. Such a good step for him. Maybe call tomorrow. After assuring her I would, I ended the call just as my manager arrived. I pushed thoughts of Jason's latest venture from my mind and focused on getting through the morning rush, then the afternoon marketing, projects, and finally my evening shift at Trattoria Romano. By the time I collapsed into my apartment at 11:30 p.m., I was too exhausted to feel the resentment that had been my constant companion for years. I set my alarm for 4:15 a.m. and fell asleep almost instantly, my dreams filled with spreadsheets, coffee orders, and the elusive promise of the assistant marketing director position I'd been working toward for the past 2 years. The next morning brought an unexpected change to my routine. Mira Johnson, the marketing director at Horizon Media, where I worked my day job, called me personally before I'd even left for the cafe. Rachel, I need you to come straight to the office this morning. Can you get your cafe shift covered? The urgency in her voice sent a spike of anxiety through me. Is everything okay? More than okay. Just get here as soon as possible. After a frantic series of calls, I managed to get my shift covered and arrived at Horizon's offices by 7:30 a.m. instead of my usual 1:00 p.m. Mira was waiting for me, her usually composed demeanor crackling with barely contained excitement. "Close the door," she said as I entered her office. Once I did, she broke into a wide smile. "Jeffrey's leaving. He accepted a position with a firm in Chicago, and his last day is in 2 weeks. Jeffrey was the assistant marketing director, the position directly above mine, the one I'd been eyeing for months. We're promoting you," Mira continued. "The team respects you. You've consistently exceeded expectations, and frankly, you've been doing half of Jeffrey's job already. The official announcement goes out tomorrow, but I wanted to tell you myself." I stood frozen, unable to process what she was saying. "You're promoting me to assistant director? With a salary adjustment to match. And Rachel? This is full recognition of your talents, not a favor. You've earned this." For the first time in years, I felt something crack in the carefully constructed wall I'd built around my emotions. Assistant marketing director. A position that would allow me to quit the cafe and restaurant jobs. A salary that meant I could finally start building savings instead of merely surviving paycheck to paycheck. "Thank you," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't. Now, I've already spoken with HR about the transition plan. We'll need you full-time starting next Monday. Can you arrange that with your other jobs?" I nodded, my mind racing through the logistics of giving notice at both the cafe and restaurant. It would be tight financially until my first full paycheck from Horizon, but the prospect of working one job instead of 3 made any temporary strain worth it. That evening, still floating on the news of my promotion, I called my parents. This achievement felt significant enough to share, substantial enough to finally merit their attention and pride. Dad answered, his voice distracted. "Rachel, can I call you back? We're in the middle of something with Jason." "Actually, Dad, I have some important news. I got promoted to assistant marketing director at Horizon Media. It's a significant step up, and I'll be able to focus entirely on my marketing career now." "That's nice, sweetheart," he said, his tone suggesting he was only half listening. "Jason's just finalizing his business proposal for a meeting with one of your mother's friends who knows a venture capitalist. It's a critical moment. Can I call you tomorrow?" The familiar disappointment washed over me, but this time it came with a new emotion, anger. "Sure, Dad. Tell Jason good luck with his pitch." I ended the call and sat on my small couch, staring at the wall of my apartment. The space I had once seen as a symbol of my independence now felt like evidence of how hard I'd had to work for what came easily to my brother: parental support, financial assistance, the luxury of pursuing dreams without the burden of survival. The following week was a blur of transitions, giving notice at my part-time jobs, training sessions with Jeffrey on his responsibilities, and adjusting to the reality that my life was about to change dramatically. Through it all, I carried the weight of my parents' indifference to my achievement, trying to focus on the recognition from Mira and my colleagues instead. When Friday arrived, Mira announced she was taking the whole marketing team out to celebrate my promotion. "Trattoria Romano at 7 p.m., she declared. "Bring your significant others if you'd like. The company's covering it." Irony of ironies. That the celebration would be at the very restaurant where I'd been serving tables just days before. Still, it felt like a perfect symmetry, a closing of one chapter and beginning of another. On impulse, I called my parents again. "Mom, the marketing team is having a dinner to celebrate my promotion tonight at Trattoria Romano. I'd really like it if you and Dad could come." To my surprise, she didn't immediately decline. "What time, honey?" 7 o'clock. It would mean a lot to have you there. Let me check with your father and call you back. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. Perhaps this tangible evidence of my success, a formal celebration attended by company leadership, would finally register as significant to them. Perhaps they would finally see that my path, though different from the entrepreneurial dreams they so admired in Jason, was valuable and worthy of recognition. My mother called back an hour later. "Rachel, I'm so sorry, but we won't be able to make it tonight. Jason needs help moving into his new apartment, and we promised we'd be there. You understand, don't you? He really needs the support right now. This move represents a fresh start for his business planning." The disappointment was so familiar, it had its own taste, bitter and stale. "Of course, Mom, no problem. We're very proud of you, though," she added, the words hollow against the reality of their choice. "Maybe we can have a family dinner to celebrate next week?" "Sure," I said, knowing it would never happen. "That sounds nice." As I hung up, I made a decision that would alter the course of my relationship with my family forever. I wasn't going to chase their approval anymore. I wasn't going to diminish my achievements because they couldn't recognize them. I wasn't going to pretend that their treatment of Jason and me was anything but profoundly unequal. That night, surrounded by colleagues who genuinely celebrated my success, I felt something shift within me. The promotion wasn't just a professional advancement. It was the beginning of recognizing my own worth, independent of my parents' validation. It was the first step toward breaking free from the patterns that had defined our family dynamics for as long as I could remember. What I didn't know then was that my newfound professional status would soon bring everything to a head in ways none of us could have anticipated. The comfortable illusions my family had maintained for years were about to shatter, and the aftermath would transform us all. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Monday following my promotion celebration marked my first official day as Assistant Marketing Director at Horizon Media. I arrived an hour early, dressed in a tailored navy suit I'd splurged on over the weekend. My first significant clothing purchase in years that wasn't from a clearance rack. The weight of 3 jobs had lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a singular focus that felt both liberating and strangely disorienting after so long. Mira had arranged for me to have Jeffrey's former office, a modest space, but with an actual door and window instead of the cubicle where I'd spent the past 2 years. As I arranged my few personal items on the desk, I felt a surge of pride. That was entirely my own, untethered from any need for parental validation. Settling in? Mira appeared in my doorway, coffee in hand. "It still feels a bit surreal," I admitted, "but in the best possible way." She smiled knowingly. "The first big promotion always does, but Rachel—" She paused, her expression turning serious. "This is just the beginning. The trajectory I see for you extends far beyond this office. I want you to start thinking bigger." "Bigger?" "Our VP of Marketing, Daniel, is planning to retire within the next 18 months. I'll be moving up, and I want you positioned to take my place." She let that sink in for a moment. "That means I'm going to push you hard this year. You'll have more client contact, more strategic input, more visibility with senior leadership." The possibility she was outlining, a path to becoming marketing director within 2 years, was beyond anything I had allowed myself to envision. Even in my most ambitious moments, I had seen the assistant director role as a destination rather than a stepping stone. "I'm ready," I said, surprised by the conviction in my voice. "Whatever it takes." The first month in my new role passed in a whirlwind of learning and adjustment. Without the exhaustion of juggling multiple jobs, I discovered reserves of creativity and strategic thinking I hadn't realized I possessed. Ideas that previously would have remained half-formed due to sheer fatigue now had space to develop and flourish. The team responded to my leadership with enthusiasm, and clients began specifically requesting my involvement in their campaigns. One particularly successful pitch to a major retail client earned praise from Daniel himself, who stopped by my office to personally commend my work. "Mira tells me you're the one to watch," he said, his typically reserved demeanor warmed by genuine approval. "Keep this up, and your future here is very bright indeed." This professional momentum stood in stark contrast to the stagnation in my relationship with my family. True to pattern, the promised celebration dinner never materialized. My occasional calls home were brief, inevitably steering toward updates about Jason's latest venture, now involving sustainable urban farming technologies apparently, and my promotion became a footnote in our family narrative. 6 weeks into my new role, everything changed with a single email from the Director of Finance. "Rachel, can you come to my office at your earliest convenience? There's a matter requiring your attention." Marcus Walsh was known throughout Horizon for his meticulousness and formality. A summons to his office rarely signaled positive news. My stomach tightened as I made my way to the finance department, mentally reviewing recent campaign budgets for any possible oversights. "Please sit down," Marcus gestured to the chair opposite his desk when I arrived. "This is somewhat unusual, but I wanted to speak with you directly rather than going through Mira initially." He slid a document across the desk, a loan application, from a company called Verdant Vision Tech. The applicant was listed as Jason Matthews. "Your brother approached Horizon's Small Business Development Fund last week with a proposal for startup financing. I recognized the last name and wanted to confirm if there's a relationship before proceeding with our standard evaluation process." I stared at the application, shock giving way to a complex tangle of emotions. Jason had applied for a $75,000 business loan from my company without so much as mentioning it to me. The executive summary outlined a vertical farming concept that sounded suspiciously similar to ideas I'd shared from one of our agricultural technology clients during a family dinner months ago. "Yes, Jason Matthews is my brother," I confirmed, my voice carefully neutral. "I had no knowledge of this application." Marcus nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "I suspected as much, given that he didn't list you as a reference despite the family connection. Our preliminary assessment flagged several concerns, notably the lack of any business experience, no personal financial investment, and some inconsistencies in the market analysis." "Inconsistencies?" "The projected revenues appear to be based on data from one of our client campaigns, information that isn't publicly available." He held my gaze steadily. "Information that would, however, have been discussed in internal strategy meetings you likely attended before your promotion." The implication was clear, and it sent a chill through me. Had Jason somehow used information I'd casually mentioned to create a business proposal? Was he attempting to leverage my company's resources without my knowledge? "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Marcus. I can assure you I've shared no confidential information with my brother or anyone outside the company. That said, I should recuse myself from any involvement in this application process to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest." Marcus seemed relieved by my response. "That would be appropriate. I'll handle this through the standard channels, and you need not be involved further." I returned to my office, my hands shaking slightly as I closed the door behind me. The audacity of Jason's move, applying to my company's business fund without telling me, potentially using information I'd mentioned in family conversations, was breathtaking even by his standards. Before I could process fully, my phone buzzed, with a text from my mother. "Your brother has exciting news. Coming to the city tomorrow to meet with potential investors. Would love to have dinner with you. Jason suggested that new restaurant near your office. 7 p.m. The pieces clicked into place with stunning clarity. Jason hadn't told them about applying to Horizon's fund either. He was coming for a meeting with the business development team, a meeting that wouldn't go well based on Marcus's assessment, and had orchestrated a dinner near my office, likely hoping I could somehow influence the outcome. For the first time in our adult lives, our roles had reversed. Jason needed something from me rather than the other way around. The realization brought no satisfaction, only a profound weariness with the dynamics that had shaped our family for so long. I replied to my mother's text, "I'll be there." The following evening, I arrived at Luciano's, an upscale Italian restaurant that had recently opened to considerable acclaim, precisely at 7. My parents and Jason were already seated, champagne flutes on the table before them in apparent pre-celebration. "There she is," my father called with unusual enthusiasm as I approached. "The corporate executive." I accepted his brief hug, noting how his eyes shone with a pride I'd rarely seen directed toward me. My mother embraced me next, exclaiming, over my appearance, "You look so professional. That suit must have cost a fortune." Jason's greeting was more subdued, a quick kiss on the cheek and a meaningful glance that confirmed my suspicions about the true purpose of this dinner. He looked the part of an entrepreneur in a blazer that still had the faint creases of newness. His startup's logo freshly emblazoned on the business cards he'd already arranged beside each place setting. "So, big day tomorrow?" I asked casually as I took my seat. Jason grinned. All confidence, despite the likelihood of rejection I knew, awaited him. "Potentially life-changing. I'm meeting with a business development fund that invests in innovative startups. They seemed very interested in my vertical farming concept." My mother beamed, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "We're so proud. All those years of exploring different interests are finally coming together in something meaningful." "Which fund?" I asked, wondering if he would actually admit it. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Horizon Partners, small but well-regarded in the startup community." He was lying outright. Horizon Media's business development fund was completely separate from Horizon Partners, which specialized in tech investments and had no connection to my company. "Interesting," I said, taking a sip of water. I wasn't aware they had interests in agricultural technology. My father jumped in, clearly eager to smooth over any potential awkwardness. "Jason's done incredible market research. Show Rachel that presentation you created, son." As Jason pulled out his tablet and began walking through a slickly designed pitch deck, I recognized slide after slide containing information directly from Horizon Media's proprietary research. Data from campaigns I had personally worked on, client insights that had never been publicly released. The dinner continued with my parents lavishing praise on Jason's thoroughness and visionary thinking, while I maintained a polite facade, asking occasional questions that he answered with increasing nervousness. By dessert, Jason finally broached the subject I'd been waiting for. "Actually, Rachel, I was hoping you might be willing to put in a good word with the fund managers. A personal recommendation from someone they respect could make all the difference." And there it was. The real reason for the dinner, the sudden interest in my professional success, the orchestrated praise from my parents. Not genuine pride in my accomplishments, but a calculated attempt to leverage my position for Jason's benefit. I set down my coffee cup carefully, aware that my response would mark a permanent shift in our family dynamic. "I can't do that, Jason." The table fell silent, my parents exchanging confused glances. "Why not?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting I was being needlessly difficult. "It's just a small favor for your brother." "It's not a small favor, Mom. It would be a serious ethical breach. And more importantly," I turned directly to Jason, "Horizon Partners doesn't exist. You applied to Horizon Media's business development fund, my company, and you used confidential client information I've occasionally mentioned at family gatherings to create your proposal." The silence that followed my statement seemed to stretch for an eternity. Jason's face drained of color, his confident facade crumbling as he realized the extent of his miscalculation. My father stared at his half-eaten tiramisu, suddenly fascinated by its layers. Only my mother attempted to salvage the situation, her nervous laugh cutting through the tension. "Rachel, surely you're exaggerating. Jason would never do something unethical. There must be some misunderstanding." I maintained my composure. Years of professional training helping me navigate this moment with dignity, rather than the emotional outburst that might have once characterized my response. "There's no misunderstanding, Mom. Marcus Walsh, our director of finance, called me into his office yesterday to discuss Jason's loan application. The document contains proprietary market research from campaigns I've worked on, information that isn't publicly available, and that I occasionally mentioned in general terms during family conversations." Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his expression transitioning from shock to a calculated appeasement. "Look, Rach, I may have been inspired by some concepts you mentioned, but I developed everything independently. If there are similarities, they're coincidental. And I had no idea you were connected to the fund. The application process was completely anonymous." The practiced ease of his lie was almost impressive. In any other circumstance, with anyone else, it might have worked. But I had spent too many years observing his patterns, watching how effortlessly he rewrote narratives to position himself as misunderstood rather than accountable. "The application wasn't anonymous, Jason. You submitted it under your full name to a company where I now serve as assistant marketing director. A company whose confidential client information appears throughout your proposal." I kept my voice even, factual rather than accusatory. "The fund has already flagged these issues. Your application will be rejected, and frankly, you're fortunate they're not pursuing this as a potential data breach." My father finally looked up, his expression hardening into the familiar disappointment I had grown accustomed to. Only this time, it was directed at Jason instead of me. "Is this true? Did you knowingly use your sister's professional information?" For the first time in my memory, Jason faltered, unable to spin a convincing defense. I didn't think it would matter. It was just general industry information that I expanded on, and I figured having Rachel at the company would help, not hurt." "Help how exactly?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jason avoided my gaze. "I thought maybe you could put in a good word, smooth the process. These applications are partly about who you know, right? I was going to tell you tonight, ask for your support." "That's all?" my mother interjected hopefully. "Well, that doesn't sound so terrible. Rachel, surely you can understand your brother was just trying to leverage family connections. That's how business works." Her immediate pivot to defending Jason, even in the face of his clear ethical lapse, was so predictable it almost didn't sting. Almost. "No, Mom. That's not how legitimate business works. What Jason attempted could have seriously damaged my professional reputation. If I had advocated for his application without disclosing our relationship, I could have lost my job. If I had known he was using confidential information and didn't report it, I would have been complicit in a breach of trust with our clients." My father, to his credit, seemed to grasp the severity of the situation. "Jason, this is completely unacceptable. You put your sister's career at risk without any consideration of the consequences for her." Jason's expression transformed again, this time into the wounded innocence that had served him so well throughout our childhood. "I was just trying to finally make something of myself, to make you all proud. Is that so wrong? Rachel has everything figured out, the corporate job, the fancy title. I'm just trying to find my path. By stealing information from my company and attempting to manipulate me into compromising my professional ethics?" The calm I had maintained began to fracture. "And let's be honest, this isn't about making something of yourself. It's about securing funding with minimal effort. Just like every other venture you've pursued." My mother gasped at my directness. "Rachel, your brother has been working incredibly hard on this business plan for months. How can you be so cruel?" "It's not cruel to state facts, Mom. In the 6 weeks since my promotion, I've worked 60-hour weeks learning a new role while building team relationships and exceeding client expectations. Meanwhile, Jason created a presentation using information I worked years to access, then attempted to leverage my position for his benefit. That's not working hard. It's opportunism wrapped in entitlement. Jason pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and be attacked like this. I made a mistake. Fine. But at least I'm trying to create something meaningful instead of just climbing some soulless corporate ladder. The familiar dismissal of my career path, the implication that his creative aspirations were somehow more worthy than my consistent professional efforts, ignited something in me that had been building for years. Meaningful? You haven't completed a single project in the decade since high school. You've bounced between discovering yourself and developing concepts, while mom and dad funded your apartments, your courses, your equipment. Meanwhile, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously for years to build a career without asking them for a dime. Well, not everyone can be perfect like you, Rachel, he snapped, resorting to his standard deflection. This isn't about perfection. It's about basic responsibility and respect, both of which you've consistently avoided. I turned to my parents, who sat frozen in apparent shock at the unraveling of the carefully maintained family dynamic. And you two have enabled this behavior at every turn, praising his potential while dismissing my actual achievements. My father found his voice first. That's not fair, Rachel. We've always been proud of you. Have you? When I called to tell you about my promotion, a position I worked 3 jobs in 6 years to earn, you couldn't even stay on the phone because Jason was finalizing his latest business proposal. You didn't attend my celebration dinner because he needed help moving into an apartment you paid for. Every milestone in my life has been secondary to whatever Jason happens to be doing at the moment. My mother's eyes welled with tears, her voice trembling. We never meant to make you feel less important. You've always been so self-sufficient, so capable. Jason just needs more support. He needs more support because you've never required him to develop the skills to support himself, I said, the truth I had contained for so long finally finding its voice. You didn't come to my celebration dinner not because you don't care about me, but because you genuinely believe Jason's mundane needs are more urgent than my significant achievements. That's the dynamic you've created, and it's damaged all of us, including Jason. My brother scoffed, though the confidence in his posture had diminished considerably. Don't pretend this is about concern for me. You're just bitter that Mom and Dad recognize I'm pursuing something creative while you chose the safe, boring path. The safe, boring path that you just tried to exploit for your benefit? I countered. The path that required me to work before sunrise and after sunset for years while you slept until noon in an apartment our parents paid for? That's not safe or boring, Jason. It's responsible. For once, neither of my parents jumped to his defense. Instead, my father stared at the table while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. The silence that fell over us carried the weight of recognition, a family mythology suddenly exposed to scrutiny. Finally, my father cleared his throat. I think we all need some time to process this conversation. Perhaps we should call it a night. Before anyone could respond, our server approached with the check. As if on autopilot, my father reached for his wallet, but I was faster. I've got this, I said, placing my credit card on the tray. Rachel, that's not necessary, my father protested weakly. Dinner was our idea. It's fine, Dad. I can afford it. The simple statement carried more meaning than its surface value, an assertion of financial independence, a subtle reminder of what I had accomplished without their support. As the server processed the payment, an uncomfortable silence descended. Again. Jason scrolled through his phone, avoiding eye contact. My mother continued to dab at tears that seemed more performative than genuine. My father simply looked tired, the weight of confronting long-established patterns visibly wearing on him. When I signed the receipt, I stood and gathered my purse. I should head home. Early meeting tomorrow. Rachel, my mother began, her voice pleading. We do love you. We are proud of you. Please don't leave like this. I paused, softening slightly at the genuine distress in her expression. I know you love me, Mom. But love without respect isn't enough. I've spent years trying to earn your recognition while watching Jason receive it freely. That ends tonight. What do you mean? My father asked, alarm edging into his voice. I mean, I'm no longer participating in the family dynamic we've established. I won't diminish my achievements to make Jason's lack of progress seem normal. I won't provide professional connections he can exploit, and I won't pretend that your treatment of us has been equal or fair. Jason finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of genuine concern breaking through his practiced indifference. So what, you're cutting us off? No, Jason. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. I shouldered my bag, standing straighter than I had in their presence for years. I'm going to continue building the life and career I've worked for. You're all welcome to be part of that life, but only if you can recognize its value without comparing it to some imaginary standard of what you think I should be doing instead. As I turned to leave, my father called after me. Rachel, wait. This isn't how family disagreements should end. I paused, turning back one last time. You're right, Dad. Family disagreements should end with honest recognition and commitment to change. When you're ready for that conversation, I'll be available. Until then, I need to focus on the people in my life who celebrate my success rather than seeking to use it for their own benefit. Walking out of that restaurant, I felt a peculiar mixture of grief and liberation. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. A lancing of a wound that had festered beneath the surface of our family relationships for too long. Outside, the city night enveloped me, its energy somehow matching my internal state, dynamic, awake, pulsing with potential. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened by the need to somehow prove my worth to my family. The validation I had sought from them for so long had finally been replaced by something more substantial, the certainty of my own value, independent of their recognition. As I hailed a taxi home, my phone buzzed with a text from Mira. Just heard back from the retail client. They want to move forward with your campaign concept. Daniel is impressed. Let's discuss expansion strategy tomorrow. I smiled, allowing myself to fully appreciate the professional recognition without the shadow of family comparison. This was my path, challenging, rewarding, and entirely my own. Not better or worse than the creative aspirations my parents so valued in Jason, but legitimate and worthy in its own right. The taxi driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. Good night? He asked. I considered the question, looking beyond its casual intent to its deeper implications. Transformative, I answered, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. The kind of night that changes everything. The 3 weeks following the confrontation at Luciano's passed in a curious mixture of professional momentum and personal silence. My family's absence from my daily life, once a persistent ache I had learned to tolerate, now felt like the removal of a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged. Without the undercurrent of seeking their approval or managing their expectations, I found myself more present, more focused, and strangely, more creative in my work. Mira noticed the change immediately. Something's different about you, she remarked during our weekly strategy session. Your presentations have always been solid, but lately they've had an edge. Bolder concepts, more innovative approaches. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. What I was doing, though I didn't fully articulate it even to myself, was stepping fully into my own authority, both professionally and personally. No longer seeking external validation, I found myself trusting my instincts more readily, advocating for my ideas with greater conviction, and approaching challenges with a clarity untainted by the need to prove my worth. The retail client campaign I had developed launched to immediate success, generating substantial social media engagement and a measurable increase in both foot traffic and online conversions. Daniel, the VP of marketing, who rarely offered specific praise, called me directly to commend the execution. "The client CEO mentioned your work specifically during the board call," he noted. "That kind of recognition doesn't happen often. I'd like you to present this case study at next month's industry conference in Chicago." The opportunity to represent Horizon at a major industry event was significant, typically reserved for director-level executives or higher. That Daniel would entrust this visibility to someone who had been assistant director for less than 2 months signaled confidence in my capabilities that exceeded even Mira's ambitious development plans for me. "I'd be honored," I responded, already mentally organizing the key points I would emphasize in such a presentation. "Good. Mira will coordinate the details with you. And Rachel?" He paused, his typically businesslike tone softening slightly. "This is well-deserved recognition. Your trajectory here continues to impress everyone paying attention." As I hung up, I experienced a moment of instinctive reaction, reaching for my phone to share the news with my parents. The habit was so ingrained that I had already navigated to my recent calls before catching myself. What would be the point? Any achievement I shared would inevitably be measured against whatever Jason's latest project happened to be, diminished by comparison to endeavors that existed primarily in concept rather than execution. Instead, I texted Alexis, a former coworker, who had become a close friend during my years juggling multiple jobs. Unlike my family, she had witnessed the daily reality of my struggle, the exhaustion, the determination, the sacrifices, and had celebrated each incremental step toward my current position with genuine enthusiasm. Presenting at the Chicago conference next month. Apparently, the retail client specifically praised my work to their board. Still processing. Her response came almost immediately. "What? That's massive. Those presentations are career makers. We're celebrating this. Weekend. No excuses. Dinner Saturday at my place, 7 p.m. I'm cooking that pasta you love." The simple, unequivocal celebration of my achievement filled me with a warmth that had been notably absent from family interactions. Alexis didn't qualify her praise, didn't immediately shift focus to someone else's news, didn't suggest ways the opportunity could have been bigger or better. She simply recognized it for what it was, a significant professional milestone worth acknowledging. As I prepared for the conference, over the following weeks, I immersed myself in the data analysis and strategic insights that had driven the campaign's success. The presentation took shape organically, telling a compelling story of consumer behavior insights translated into actionable marketing strategy. I practiced extensively, refining my delivery until the content flowed naturally while maintaining the authoritative presence expected at such a high-profile event. Through it all, my phone remained silent where family communication was concerned. No calls from my mother checking in, no texts from my father about weekend plans, not even the occasional meme from Jason that had once constituted our minimal interaction. The silence was pointed rather than accidental, a response to boundaries they had never before encountered from me. 2 days before I was scheduled to leave for Chicago, that silence finally broke. My phone rang just as I was finishing a final review of my presentation slides. My father's name appeared on the screen, triggering a complex wave of emotions: apprehension, residual hurt, but also a measured curiosity about what might have prompted this contact after weeks of distance. "Hello?" I answered, my tone neutral, but not unwelcoming. "Rachel." My father's voice sounded different, hesitant, lacking the casual authority that had characterized most of our interactions. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "I'm just wrapping up some work. What's on your mind?" He cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking since that dinner." A lot of uncomfortable thinking, to be honest. We were wondering if you might be willing to meet with us. Perhaps for coffee this weekend? Just us, not Jason. The specificity of excluding Jason from this proposed meeting was notable. An acknowledgement, however subtle, that the dynamics at play extended beyond a single disagreement about his business proposal. I'm actually leaving for Chicago tomorrow, I explained, presenting at an industry conference on behalf of Horizon. A conference presentation? There was genuine interest in his voice, none of the dismissive politeness that had previously characterized his responses to my professional updates. That sounds significant. It is. The VP of Marketing specifically requested that I represent the company based on the success of a recent campaign I developed. Rachel, that's impressive, truly. His words carried a weight of recognition I had seldom heard from him. Perhaps when you return then, we really would like to talk. I considered the request, weighing my lingering hurt against the possibility that their weeks of reflection might have yielded genuine insight. I'll be back late Sunday. I could meet Monday evening if that works. Monday would be perfect. Thank you for being willing. The relief in his voice was palpable. And Rachel, good luck with your presentation. I'm sure you'll be exceptional. After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes, processing the subtle but significant shifts in that brief conversation. My father's uncharacteristic humility, his straightforward acknowledgement of my professional achievement, the deliberate decision to meet without Jason present. Something had changed, though whether it represented a meaningful evolution in their perspective or merely a tactical adjustment to my newly established boundaries remained to be seen. The Chicago conference unfolded with the seamless professionalism typical of major industry events, keynote speakers sharing market trends, breakout sessions exploring specialized topics, networking opportunities structured around catered meals, and evening receptions. My presentation was scheduled for the second day, positioned prominently in the main agenda rather than relegated to a concurrent session. As I took the stage, scanning the audience of marketing executives and industry influencers, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity, a recognition that every challenge I had overcome, every extra shift I had worked, every moment of exhaustion I had pushed through had led precisely to this opportunity, not because those struggles were necessary or fair, but because they had forged in me a resilience and determination that now informed every aspect of my professional presence. The presentation flowed naturally, my command of the material evident, as I guided the audience through the research insights, strategic decisions, and measurable outcomes that had defined the campaign. The question period that followed revealed genuine engagement with the concepts I had presented. Several attendees, approaching me afterward to exchange contact information and explore potential collaborations. Impressive work, commented a woman who introduced herself as the CMO of a major consumer products company. We're actually looking for fresh perspectives on our digital strategy. Would you be open to a conversation about consulting opportunities? By the time I boarded my return flight Sunday evening, I had collected business cards from a dozen senior executives interested in either hiring Horizon for their marketing needs or exploring how I might contribute to their projects in an advisory capacity. The validation was professional rather than personal, based on demonstrable results rather than familial obligation, and all the more meaningful for that distinction. Monday evening arrived with a peculiar sense of both anticipation and detachment. I had selected a quiet cafe halfway between my apartment and my parents' home in the suburbs, neutral territory that wouldn't carry the emotional weight of more familiar settings. Arriving early, I chose a corner table that offered privacy without isolation, ordered a cappuccino, and settled in to wait. My parents arrived precisely on time, looking somehow smaller than I remembered, more human, less the mythic figures who had loomed so large in my emotional landscape. My mother's typically perfect appearance showed subtle signs of strain, less carefully applied makeup, hair pulled back in a simple style, rather than her usual elaborate arrangement. My father, always impeccably dressed for his executive position, wore casual slacks and a sweater, his formal business attire conspicuously absent. "Thank you for meeting us," my mother began after they had ordered their drinks. "We've missed you." "How was the conference?" my father asked, his interest appearing genuine rather than perfunctory. "It went well," I replied, briefly outlining the positive response to my presentation and the professional connections it had generated. To my surprise, they listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about the technical aspects of the campaign and the potential opportunities that had emerged from my networking efforts. When I finished, an uncertain silence fell. My mother fidgeted with her napkin. My father straightened his silverware with unusual precision. Whatever they had come to say clearly didn't come easily. Finally, my father took a deep breath. "Rachel, your mother and I owe you an apology, a profound one. What you said at dinner that night, about our treatment of you compared to Jason, about dismissing your achievements while celebrating his potential, it was difficult to hear, but it was true." My mother nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "We've spent these weeks really examining our behavior over the years. The patterns became so established we stopped seeing them. It took your confrontation to make us recognize what we've been doing, not just to you, but to Jason as well." "To Jason?" I echoed, surprised by this inclusion. My father nodded soberly. "By never holding him accountable, by praising intention over action, by financially supporting endeavors he wasn't truly committed to, we've enabled a perpetual adolescence that's prevented him from developing the very qualities we so admire in you: resilience, determination, professional integrity." The acknowledgement was so unexpected, so precisely aligned with realizations I had long harbored but never expected them to share, that I found myself momentarily speechless. "We're not asking for immediate forgiveness," my mother continued into the silence. "We know that trust, once damaged, takes time to rebuild. But we want you to know that we've heard you, really heard you, and we're committed to changing these patterns." I studied them carefully, looking beyond words to the sincerity in their expressions. "What does that change look like practically?" I asked, unwilling to accept vague assurances without specific commitments. My father nodded, as if he had anticipated this question. "For starters, we've informed Jason that we'll no longer be providing financial support for his ventures. If he wants to pursue entrepreneurship, he'll need to do it while supporting himself through steady employment, like countless other startup founders do. And we're not dismissing your achievements anymore," my mother added. "We've spent hours looking through your company's website, reading about the campaigns you've worked on, truly understanding the significance of your position. We should have done that years ago." Their words offered the recognition I had long sought, yet I maintained a cautious emotional distance, unwilling to immediately dismantle the boundaries that had provided such unexpected freedom these past weeks. "I appreciate hearing that," I said carefully, "but rebuilding our relationship will require consistent actions over time, not just a single conversation." "We know," my father acknowledged. "We're asking only for the opportunity to demonstrate, through our behavior going forward, that we've genuinely heard you and are committed to change." As our meeting concluded, I found myself in an unfamiliar emotional territory, neither fully reconciled nor completely estranged, but inhabiting a new space of cautious possibility. The dynamics that had defined our family for decades had been irrevocably disrupted, creating room for potentially healthier patterns to emerge. Walking home afterward, I reflected on the strange symmetry of this personal breakthrough coinciding with my professional advancement. Both represented a fundamental shift in how I positioned myself in relation to external validation, no longer seeking approval from either family or authority figures, but standing firmly in my own worth and capabilities. The boundaries I had established weren't walls to keep others out, but foundations upon which more balanced relationships might eventually be built. Whether my parents would truly transform their long-established patterns remained to be seen, but their recognition of those patterns was itself a significant step, one I had never expected to witness. As I entered my apartment, my phone chimed with an email notification. Daniel and Mira had copied me on a message to the entire executive team, praising my conference presentation and announcing that I would be taking lead on a major new client acquisition strategy. The recognition was professional, public, and based entirely on demonstrated merit rather than personal connection. I smiled, feeling the full weight of the contrast between this clear acknowledgement of my capabilities and the qualified recognition I had spent years seeking from my family. The difference wasn't just in who provided the validation, but in how I received it, not as external confirmation of my worth, but as appropriate recognition of value I already knew I possessed. My journey was far from complete, both professionally and personally. But for perhaps the first time, I was walking forward on a path I had consciously chosen, unburdened by the weight of expectations that had never truly been mine to carry. The Monday morning following my meeting with my parents brought a surprise I hadn't anticipated. As I settled at my desk, reviewing the week's priorities and responding to emails that had accumulated during the conference, my assistant Gabriella knocked gently on my open door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, her expression suggesting uncertainty about the unscheduled visitor. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent. Jason Matthews?" The appearance of my brother at my workplace, especially after the business loan debacle and weeks of silence, was so unexpected that I momentarily struggled to formulate a response. "Did he mention why he's here?" I asked, buying time while I considered my options. "Only that it's a personal matter and he won't take much of your time." Gabriella lowered her voice slightly. "I can tell him you're in meetings all morning if you prefer." The offer was tempting. The professional boundary between my work and family complications was one I valued highly, particularly after Jason's previous attempt to blur those lines. Yet something in me, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a lingering sense of familial responsibility, made me hesitate. "It's all right," I decided. "I can give him 15 minutes. Please let him know I have a client call at 10:30 that can't be rescheduled." Jason appeared in my doorway moments later, looking markedly different from the confidently entitled entrepreneur who had orchestrated the dinner at Luciano's. The designer clothes were replaced with simple jeans and a button-down shirt. The practiced charm that typically animated his features had given way to an uncharacteristic solemnity. "Thanks for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until I gestured toward the chair opposite my desk. "I know I'm the last person you probably want to deal with right now. What can I do for you, Jason?" I kept my tone professional, neither hostile nor particularly welcoming. He sat forward, hands clasped tightly together. "First, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the kind I usually give when I've messed up." He met my gaze directly, without the evasive charm he typically employed when attempting to smooth over conflicts. "What I did was wrong. Using information you shared in family settings for my business proposal, applying to your company's fund without telling you, trying to leverage your position. All of it." The straightforward acknowledgement, without excuses or deflection, was so unlike my brother's usual approach that I found myself momentarily speechless. "I've spent the last few weeks doing some hard thinking," he continued when I didn't immediately respond. "Mom and Dad finally cut me off financially. At first I was furious, blamed you actually for turning them against me. But after the initial anger passed, I started seeing things differently." "What things?" I asked, my professional detachment beginning to give way to genuine curiosity about this apparent transformation. "The patterns. How I've been living essentially as a professional dreamer, always on to the next big idea without ever developing the discipline to execute. How I've used mom and dad's support as a safety net that prevented me from ever experiencing the real consequences of my choices. He rubbed his hand across his face, a gesture of vulnerability I'd rarely seen from him. And how I've resented your success even while trying to exploit it. The admission hung between us, its honesty creating an opening for a different kind of conversation than we'd ever managed to have as adults. That couldn't have been easy to recognize, I acknowledged, softening slightly. It wasn't. Still isn't. A self-deprecating smile briefly crossed his face. But here's the thing. Watching how you've built your career, step by persistent step, I've realized something important. I've been chasing the end result without being willing to engage with the process. I wanted the successful business, without putting in the years of learning and growth that make success possible. His insight struck me as remarkably similar to realizations I'd had during my years working multiple jobs, observations about the gap between ambition and execution, between potential and actualized capability. That Jason was articulating these thoughts suggested a level of self-reflection I hadn't previously believed him capable of. "So what now?" I asked. "What brings you here specifically?" He straightened in his chair, his expression shifting from apologetic to cautiously hopeful. "I've applied for an entry-level position at Brennan Digital. It's a small marketing firm across town, nothing as prestigious as Horizon, but they have a solid reputation in local business development. The role is basically an assistant account coordinator, making copies, scheduling meetings, supporting the actual marketing team." The contrast between this modest starting position and the grandiose entrepreneurial ventures he had previously pursued was striking. That's a significant change in direction. "It's where I need to start," he said with unexpected humility. "I don't have your education or experience in the field, but I do have some creative instincts that might eventually be valuable if I'm willing to learn the fundamentals first. And you're here because—" I left the question open, still uncertain of his specific purpose in coming to my office. They asked for professional references, people who can speak to my character and potential in a business environment. He hesitated, clearly aware of the irony in this request given our recent history. "I know I have no right to ask after how I've behaved, but you're the only person in my life who actually works in marketing and understands what the industry requires. If you felt you could provide a reference, an honest one, not sugar-coated, it would help tremendously." The request placed me in a complex position. On one hand, Jason's recent actions had demonstrated precisely the lack of ethical judgment that would make me hesitate to recommend him professionally. On the other, the self-awareness he was displaying suggested a potential turning point, one that might be nurtured by precisely the kind of structured entry-level position he was describing. "I'm not comfortable providing a reference that glosses over recent events," I said after careful consideration. "My professional reputation is built on integrity. I can't compromise that even for family." "I understand," he replied, his disappointment evident but tempered with resignation. "It was worth asking, but I respect your decision." As he stood to leave, a different approach occurred to me, one that honored both my professional ethics and the fragile new awareness Jason seemed to be developing. "Wait," I said. "I have a counter-proposal. I won't provide a traditional reference, but I'd be willing to have a candid conversation with the hiring manager if they call. I'll acknowledge your creative thinking and communication skills, which are genuine strengths. I'll also be honest about your recent lapse in judgment regarding confidential information, but frame it as a learning experience that prompted significant self-reflection." Jason considered this, nodding slowly. "That's fair. More than fair, actually. I'd also include that you've shown courage in confronting patterns that weren't serving you well, and that you've demonstrated a willingness to start at the beginning rather than seeking shortcuts." I met his gaze directly. "Because that part is true, isn't it? This isn't just another angle you're playing because the entrepreneurial route got complicated. It's real, he affirmed, a new steadiness in his voice. For the first time in maybe forever, I'm not looking for the quickest path to success or recognition. I'm looking for the right path, even if it's longer and harder. Something in his sincerity resonated with my own journey, different in specifics, but similar in the fundamental challenge of aligning actions with authentic values rather than external expectations. Then I'll speak with them if they call, I agreed. But Jason, this is a one-time offer. If you revert to old patterns, if I hear you've been cutting corners or misrepresenting yourself, I'll withdraw my willingness to be professionally connected to you in any way. Understood. He extended his hand formally, as one colleague to another, rather than as a brother seeking easy forgiveness. Thank you, Rachel. Not just for this, but for finally being direct enough that I couldn't ignore the reality of my situation anymore. After he left, I sat contemplating this unexpected development. The confrontation at Luciano's had been necessary but painful, a rupture in family dynamics that had seemed potentially permanent. Yet its aftermath was yielding possibilities I hadn't anticipated. My parents' acknowledgement of long-standing patterns, and now Jason's tentative steps toward genuine self-awareness and responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on me, that in finally refusing to participate in our dysfunctional family system, I had perhaps contributed to its potential healing more effectively than years of accommodation had done. By valuing myself enough to establish clear boundaries, I had created space for others to recognize the necessity of change. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Matthews, this is Andrea Carr from Brennan Digital. Your brother listed you as a professional reference. Would you be available for a brief conversation tomorrow regarding his application? I responded affirmatively, scheduling a call for the following morning. True to my word to Jason, I prepared to offer a balanced assessment, acknowledging both his genuine creative abilities and the ethical lapse that had prompted our recent conflict, emphasizing his willingness to learn from the experience rather than repeat it. The call with Andrea Carr proved more substantive than I had expected. Rather than simply checking boxes on a standard reference form, she engaged in a nuanced conversation about Jason's potential fit within their organization. We're a small firm, she explained. Character and teachability matter as much as initial skills. When candidates list family members as references, we're typically skeptical, but your position at Horizon gives your perspective particular relevance. I appreciate your thoroughness, I responded. My relationship with my brother is complicated, as family relationships often are. But I believe in being completely transparent about both strengths and areas for growth. I proceeded to outline Jason's creative thinking, strong communication skills, and ability to develop concepts with market appeal. I also acknowledged the recent incident involving confidential information, framing it as I had promised, as a significant lapse in judgment that had prompted important self-reflection and growth. That level of honesty is refreshing, Andrea commented. Most references, especially family ones, present only strengths. Professional integrity requires acknowledging the complete picture, I replied. What I can tell you with confidence is that my brother is at a genuine turning point. He's recognizing patterns that haven't served him well and showing willingness to start at the foundation rather than seeking shortcuts to success. After we concluded the call, I felt a curious sense of equilibrium, having neither sabotaged Jason's opportunity nor compromised my professional standards to artificially enhance his prospects. The outcome would be determined by his own merits and Andrea's judgment, as it should be. That evening, I received another unexpected communication, an email from Daniel, our VP of Marketing, with the subject line, Confidential, Advance Notice. Rachel, it began, before the formal announcement goes out tomorrow, I wanted to give you personal notice of an organizational change. Mira has accepted a position with our London office, effective next month. After careful consideration with the executive team, I'll be recommending you as her replacement as marketing director, bypassing the typical interim period. Your performance has consistently demonstrated readiness for this level of responsibility, and the success of your conference presentation confirmed what many of us have observed over the past year. Please keep this confidential until tomorrow's announcement. We can discuss transition details when you have time this week. The news was stunning, not just the promotion itself, which would represent a multi-level advancement beyond the typical career progression, but the recognition it represented. Marketing director was a senior leadership position, one that would place me on the executive team barely 6 months after my promotion to assistant director. My first impulse, surprisingly, was to call my parents. Not from the habitual seeking of validation that had characterized much of my life, but from a genuine desire to share significant news with people who might finally be prepared to recognize its meaning without comparison or qualification. When my mother answered, I simply said, "I have some news I'd like to share. Are you and Dad available for dinner this weekend?" "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's more than all right," I assured her. "I've received some professional news that I'd like to share in person." "We'll be there," she promised, then added with uncharacteristic directness, "Rachel, whatever it is, we're proud of you, not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you are. I hope you know that." The simple statement, delivered without prompted or qualification, carried the weight of the shift our recent conversations had begun to create. It wasn't dramatic or effusive, but its straightforward acknowledgement represented a step toward the healthier dynamic I had long sought but rarely expected to experience. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself reflecting on the strange trajectory of the past 2 months, how my professional advancement had catalyzed a confrontation of long-standing family patterns, which in turn had created space for unexpected growth and realignment. The promotion to marketing director would bring new challenges and opportunities, but perhaps the most significant development wasn't the title itself, but the internal shift it represented. I was no longer working to prove my worth to others, whether family members who prioritize different values or colleagues whose approval I had once sought as substitute validation. Instead, I was building a career and life aligned with my own, authentic strengths and values, allowing recognition to follow naturally from that alignment rather than driving my choices. The boundaries I had established weren't walls of separation, but foundations for healthier connections. With my parents, potentially with Jason, and most importantly, with myself. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges and complexities, but I would navigate them from a center of hard-won self-knowledge and confidence that no external circumstance could easily shake. As I drifted toward sleep, a thought surfaced with unexpected clarity. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin not with dramatic external changes, but with the quiet, revolutionary act of finally recognizing your own worth and requiring others to recognize it too. The conference room fell silent as Daniel concluded his announcement. And so, effective next month, Rachel Matthews will assume the role of marketing director, leading our team through this exciting period of growth. Please join me in congratulating her on this well-deserved promotion. The applause that followed carried genuine warmth, a testament to the relationships I'd built within the department over years of collaborative work. As colleagues approached with congratulations, I noticed a distinct quality in their responses that differed from typical professional acknowledgments. There was respect, certainly, but also something deeper, perhaps recognition of the journey, that had brought me to this moment. "No one deserves this more," Gabriella whispered as she hugged me briefly. "We've all seen how hard you've worked for this." After the formal announcement, Daniel invited me to join him and several executive team members for lunch, my first informal gathering with the leadership group I would soon be officially joining. As we settled around a table at the upscale restaurant near our office building, I observed the subtle dynamics among these seasoned executives. The shorthand communication developed through years of collaboration, the balanced mixture of professional focus and personal connection, the comfortable confidence that comes from proven capability rather than positional authority. Marcus Walsh, the finance director who had first alerted me to Jason's loan application, raised his water glass in a simple toast. To Rachel, whose integrity matches her talent, a rare and valuable combination. The acknowledgement of that specific quality, particularly coming from Marcus, who had witnessed firsthand my handling of a situation where personal and professional boundaries intersected, carried special significance. In that moment, I fully appreciated how the most challenging episodes in our lives often reveal character dimensions that might otherwise remain unrecognized. "Thank you," I responded. "That means a great deal, especially coming from you." The conversation flowed naturally to departmental strategies and upcoming initiatives, with other executives casually soliciting my perspective on marketing questions, treating me as a peer whose insights carried legitimate value. The inclusion felt organic rather than forced, suggesting that my promotion acknowledged a level of contribution I had already been making rather than creating an artificial elevation. Returning to my office afterward, I found an email notification for a calendar invitation. Marketing Director Transition Planning, Mira Reynolds and Rachel Matthews. Scheduled for the following morning, this would be our first formal discussion about the handover of responsibilities Mira had managed for nearly 5 years. I'd always admired Mira's leadership style, her strategic vision balanced with practical execution, her commitment to developing team members' capabilities, her unwavering professionalism even in high-pressure situations. The opportunity to step into her role represented both a tremendous responsibility and an implicit acknowledgement that I had absorbed the lessons she had modeled throughout our working relationship. That evening, as I left the office, I encountered Jeffrey, my predecessor as assistant director who had moved to another company several months earlier, waiting in the lobby. His unexpected presence momentarily startled me. "Jeffrey, what brings you back to Horizon?" He smiled, extending his hand. "Heard the news about your promotion. Thought I'd offer congratulations in person since I was in the neighborhood for a client meeting." "That's incredibly thoughtful. Thank you." We moved toward the building exit together. "How's the new position treating you?" "Challenging in all the right ways," he replied. "But actually, I wanted to tell you something that might sound strange." He hesitated, seeming to carefully consider his next words. "When I left, I specifically recommended you as my replacement, but I had no idea you'd advance to director so quickly. It's impressive, Rachel, and, if I'm honest, a little intimidating." "Intimidating?" I echoed, surprised by his candor. "Why?" "Because it took me 6 years to reach assistant director, and you've gone from there to director in less than 6 months. His expression held no resentment, only genuine admiration. "It makes me wonder what might have been possible if I'd approached my career with your level of focus and determination." The observation struck me powerfully, not because of the implied comparison, but because it highlighted how differently I had moved through my professional journey since establishing clearer boundaries with my family. Without the constant drain of seeking external validation or managing their expectations, my energy had been channeled more purely into meaningful work and authentic leadership. "I appreciate that, Jeffrey, but our paths aren't really comparable. Different circumstances, different timing." I smiled, acknowledging the complexity behind simple career trajectories. "And I learned a great deal from working with you." As we parted ways outside the building, I found myself reflecting on the curious interconnectedness of our professional lives, how Jeffrey's departure had created the opening for my initial promotion, how that shift had precipitated the confrontation with my family, and how that personal transformation had perhaps contributed to my accelerated advancement to director. The following morning's meeting with Mira further reinforced this sense of intentional progression rather than lucky coincidence. Rather than simply outlining tactical handover points, she approached our discussion from a more philosophical perspective. Leadership at this level isn't primarily about marketing expertise, she observed as we reviewed the department's strategic plan. It's about creating conditions where others can do their best work, advocating effectively with senior leadership, and maintaining vision through inevitable challenges. You've demonstrated those qualities consistently, which is why Daniel and I recommended you specifically, rather than conducting an external search. I've had excellent models to learn from, I acknowledged, especially you. She smiled, accepting the compliment with characteristic grace. There's something uniquely satisfying about seeing someone you've mentored step into expanded responsibility. It creates a kind of professional legacy that extends beyond any individual campaign or initiative. The idea resonated with me, that our work lives weren't simply about personal advancement or achievement, but about creating ripples of positive influence that continued long after specific projects were completed. I thought of the team members I would now be leading, wondering how my approach might shape their professional development and future opportunities. Over the following weeks, as Mira gradually transferred responsibilities to me and I began participating in executive-level strategy sessions, I experienced a subtle but significant psychological shift. The foundational confidence that had emerged from establishing healthier family boundaries expanded into my professional identity, manifesting as clearer decision-making, more authentic leadership presence, and greater comfort with the ambiguity inherent in senior roles. This transformation didn't go unnoticed. During one executive committee meeting focused on annual planning, the CEO, who rarely offered specific feedback, paused the discussion to make an observation. "Rachel, I've been watching how you approach these complex challenges. There's a clarity to your thinking that cuts through unnecessary complication. It's exactly what we need, especially as we enter this expansion phase." Coming from the organization's senior leader, this recognition might once have triggered my habitual response of intensified effort to maintain approval. Instead, I received it simply as acknowledgement of value I was genuinely contributing, neither dismissing its significance nor allowing it to define my sense of professional worth. The weekend dinner with my parents approached with a curious mixture of anticipation and lingering caution. While our recent interactions had shown promising shifts, decades of established patterns couldn't be completely transformed through a few conversations. I selected a restaurant that balanced nice without excessive formality, a setting conducive to meaningful discussion without the emotional weight of either their home or mine. They arrived precisely on time, both dressed with careful attention that suggested the significance they placed on this meeting. As we were seated, I noticed subtle but meaningful differences in their demeanor, a certain tentative openness that contrasted with the confident certainty that had previously characterized their interactions with me. After we ordered, my father leaned forward slightly. "You mentioned professional news. We've been wondering what developments warranted an in-person dinner." "I've been promoted to marketing director at Horizon," I said simply. "It's a significant advancement, 2 levels above my previous position and unusual in its timing. I'll be joining the executive leadership team and taking over department management when Mira transfers to our London office next month." I watched their reactions carefully, attuned to the subtle indicators of how this news would be received. My mother's eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise evident in her expression. My father set down his water glass deliberately, processing the information with focused attention. "Marketing director," he repeated, his tone suggesting he was absorbing the full significance of the title. "That's extraordinary, Rachel, especially considering how recently you moved into the assistant director role." The executive team felt my performance warranted accelerated advancement, I explained, neither diminishing the achievement nor seeking their validation of its importance. It represents a substantial increase in both responsibility and compensation. "We're so proud of you," my mother said, reaching across the table to briefly touch my hand. "Truly proud. This is a tremendous accomplishment." What struck me most was what didn't follow her statement. No comparison to Jason's situation, no qualification about different types of success, no subtle pivot to other family news. The acknowledgement stood complete in itself, neither exaggerated nor diminished. "Thank you," I replied simply. "The timing feels right. I'm ready for the challenge." "I have no doubt," my father affirmed. "Your approach to building your career has been methodical and persistent. Those qualities serve well in leadership positions." As our appetizers arrived, the conversation shifted to practical aspects of the promotion, the expanded team I would be managing, the strategic initiatives I would be leading, the international dimensions of working with Horizon's global offices. They listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated real engagement with the significance of this professional milestone. During a natural pause in the discussion, my mother ventured into more personal territory. "We saw Jason yesterday. He mentioned you helped with his application to Brennan Digital." I nodded, maintaining neutral composure. I provided a reference when requested, honest about both strengths and areas for development. "He got the position," my father informed me. "Started this week as an assistant coordinator, entry level, as he described it to you." "That's good to hear," I responded, genuinely pleased that Jason would have the opportunity to develop professional skills in a structured environment. "How is he approaching it?" My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Differently than anything we've seen before," my mother finally answered. "He's taking it very seriously, researching the company's clients, studying marketing basics in the evenings. He mentioned that watching your career progression helped him recognize the value of building expertise systematically rather than searching for shortcuts." The acknowledgement of Jason's shift in perspective, and its connection to my example rather than their guidance, represented a remarkable evolution in our family dynamics. For perhaps the first time, my approach to professional development was being recognized as a positive model rather than an uninspiring alternative to more creative paths. "He also told us about your conversation regarding the loan application," my father added, his expression somber. "About how he attempted to use information you had mentioned in family settings for his business proposal. We had no idea, Rachel. When he first told us you weren't supporting his venture, we assumed." He trailed off, the implicit admission hanging between us. "You assumed I was being ungenerous or unsupportive," I completed the thought, "because that fit the established narrative." He nodded, accepting this characterization without defensiveness. "We did. And we were wrong." When Jason finally explained the full situation, we realized the extent to which our assumptions about both of you had clouded our perspective for years. "We enabled patterns that weren't serving either of you well," my mother acknowledged. "Praising Jason's potential without requiring meaningful effort, while simultaneously taking your diligence and achievement for granted. It wasn't intentional, but intention doesn't negate impact." Their willingness to articulate these realizations, without excuses or qualifications, suggested a depth of reflection I hadn't fully anticipated. The acknowledgement wasn't merely about this specific incident, but about recognizing the cumulative effect of long-established patterns on our family relationships. "I appreciate hearing that," I said carefully. "Recognizing those dynamics has been important for me too, not just in relation to family, but in understanding how I approach my professional life and personal relationships more broadly." As dinner progressed, our conversation evolved into territory we had rarely explored previously, genuine exchange about experiences and perspectives rather than performance updates or practical arrangements. For the first time in memory, I felt myself relaxing into their company, neither seeking approval nor maintaining defensive distance, but simply engaging as an adult with her own developed identity and values. When we parted after dinner, the goodbye carried a different quality than our previous interactions, a mutual recognition of both the progress we had made and the continuing journey toward healthier relationships. "We'd like to host a small celebration for your promotion," my mother suggested as we stood outside the restaurant. "Nothing elaborate, just family and perhaps a few close friends. Would that be something you'd welcome?" The invitation represented both acknowledgement of my professional milestone and recognition of my agency in defining family interactions. Rather than assuming my participation or dismissing the achievement's significance, they were explicitly recognizing its importance while respecting my boundaries. "I'd like that," I replied, finding that I genuinely meant it. "Thank you for suggesting it." As I drove home afterward, I reflected on the remarkable transformations the past months had brought, not just in my professional status or family dynamics, but in my fundamental relationship with achievement and recognition. The promotion to marketing director was significant, certainly, but its true value lay not in the title itself, but in what it represented. The culmination of persistent effort aligned with authentic capabilities and values. The external validation, whether from the executive team, colleagues, or even my newly attentive parents, was gratifying but no longer essential to my sense of worth. The most meaningful change was internal, the growing certainty that I was building a life based on my own definitions of success, rather than inherited expectations or compensatory striving. The journey was far from complete. Building a leadership presence at the executive level would bring new challenges and growth, opportunities. Evolving family relationships would require continued attention and boundary maintenance. But for perhaps the first time, I felt fully equipped to navigate these complexities from a center of authentic self-knowledge rather than reactive patterns. The multiple jobs I had worked for years had taught me persistence, resourcefulness, and resilience. The professional recognition I had earned provided platforms for meaningful contribution and continued growth. And most significantly, the difficult confrontations with family patterns had freed me to relate to both achievement and relationship from a place of genuine choice rather than conditioned response. As I arrived home, a text message appeared from an unknown number. "Ms. Matthews, this is Andrea Carr from Brennan Digital. Your brother has impressed us with his approach to the assistant position. Prepared, eager to learn, and remarkably humble considering his creative capabilities. The reference you provided proved insightful and accurate. I wanted to thank you for your candor and let you know it contributed to what I believe will be a positive professional development opportunity for him." I smiled at this unexpected update, appreciating both Jason's apparent commitment to his fresh start and Andrea's professional courtesy in sharing this feedback. The situation represented a microcosm of the broader transformation underway, how establishing clear boundaries and authentic communication could create space for everyone to grow into healthier patterns. Setting my phone aside, I moved to my apartment's small balcony, gazing at the city lights spreading before me. The view reminded me of how far I had come from those exhausting days of juggling multiple jobs, fighting for recognition that seemed perpetually reserved for others, struggling to believe in my own path while bombarded with subtle messages about its inadequacy. The journey hadn't been easy, and certain parts had been painful in ways I couldn't have anticipated. But standing in this moment of clarity, professionally recognized, personally centered, increasingly free from lifelong patterns of seeking external validation, I understood something essential about transformation. It rarely comes through comfort or external permission. It emerges from the courage to define your own worth and the persistence to align your life with that definition, regardless of who notices or approves. My promotion hadn't changed everything, as dramatic narratives might suggest. but it had served as a catalyst for recognizing and addressing deeper patterns that had limited not just my professional trajectory, but my fundamental relationship with achievement, family, and self-worth. The real transformation wasn't in the title or salary or status, but in the internal freedom to define success on my own terms, and to require that others respect those terms if they wish to remain part of my journey. The first month in my role as marketing director brought challenges that tested the full spectrum of my capabilities. Mira's departure for the London office had been accelerated by urgent international client needs, leaving me with a compressed transition period and immediate leadership expectations. The executive team's confidence in my readiness was both affirming and daunting, a vote of trust that I was determined to honor through results rather than mere effort. My initial weeks were consumed with balancing immediate operational demands while establishing my leadership approach with the team. Horizon's marketing department included 23 professionals across various specialties: creative directors, data analysts, content strategists, campaign managers, each bringing distinct perspectives and expectations about departmental direction. Your first major challenge will be cultural, not technical, Daniel had advised during our transition planning. They respect your work, but shifting from peer to leader requires redefining relationships. Some will adapt easily, others will test boundaries. How you navigate these early interactions will establish patterns that persist throughout your tenure. His counsel proved prescient. Most team members responded to my leadership with enthusiasm and collaborative engagement. A few, however, particularly those who had privately hoped for the director position themselves, demonstrated subtle resistance through passive compliance rather than active contribution. Cameron Reed, our senior creative director who had been with Horizon for nearly a decade, emerged as the most significant leadership challenge. Brilliant but temperamental, Cameron had built his reputation on award-winning campaign concepts that frequently pushed boundaries of both creativity and budget. His work consistently impressed clients, but his process often created friction with account managers and analytics teams. Our first conflict emerged during a strategy session for Vertex Pharmaceuticals, a major healthcare client seeking to launch a revolutionary treatment for autoimmune conditions. Cameron presented concept boards featuring provocative imagery and narrative approaches that, while undeniably powerful, deviated significantly from both the approved creative brief and the client's conservative industry positioning. "This isn't what they asked for," I noted after his presentation, keeping my tone measured but direct. The brief specifically emphasized medical authority and clinical evidence as primary themes. Cameron leaned back, arms crossed in a posture of creative defiance I had witnessed numerous times when he was challenged by account managers. They asked for impact and differentiation. This delivers both. What they think they want and what will actually cut through market noise are rarely the same thing. Before my promotion, I might have deferred to his creative judgment or sought Mira's intervention in navigating this tension. Now, as department leader, the resolution rested with me. "Your concepts are powerful," I acknowledged, recognizing the genuine creative merit in his work. "But our role isn't simply to produce striking creative, it's to achieve specific business outcomes within parameters our clients have established. This approach risks alienating key stakeholders before the campaign even launches." The conference room fell silent as team members awaited Cameron's response. His influence within the creative team was significant, and how I handled this interaction would send signals throughout the department about my leadership style and priorities. "So you want safe, predictable work that checks bureaucratic boxes, rather than actually accomplishing anything meaningful?" His tone carried an edge of condescension that had often intimidated more junior colleagues. Rather than reacting defensively or asserting positional authority, I paused, considering how to address both the content of his objection and the underlying dynamic it represented. "What I want," I replied evenly, "is work that delivers transformative results while respecting client parameters. Those aren't mutually exclusive goals. Your creative instincts are valuable, Cameron, but they're most effective when channeled within strategic boundaries, not deployed against them. I turned to the presentation screen, highlighting specific elements of his concepts. These narrative approaches? Brilliant. This visual metaphor? Genuinely moving. Let's preserve these strengths while realigning the overall direction with the healthcare authority positioning that forms the foundation of their brand strategy. By acknowledging the legitimate value in his work while firmly maintaining accountable direction, I offered a path forward that neither surrendered leadership nor diminished his creative contribution. The approach diffused immediate tension while establishing clear expectations about how creative development would proceed under my leadership. Later that afternoon, Cameron appeared in my office doorway, his typical confidence tempered with what appeared to be reluctant respect. "I've been thinking about your feedback. You might be right about finding middle ground. I've sketched some alternative approaches that preserve the emotional impact while incorporating more explicit clinical elements." The moment represented a small but significant victory, not because I had compelled compliance, but because I had engaged authentically with both the creative challenge and the interpersonal dynamic underlying it. By leading from a place of genuine respect for Cameron's talents while maintaining clear standards aligned with client needs, I had begun establishing a leadership pattern based on substantive expertise rather than positional authority alone. Similar challenges emerged across various dimensions of departmental management: budget allocations that required difficult prioritization, team members seeking exceptions to established processes, clients pushing for unrealistic timelines. In each case, I found myself drawing on principles that had crystallized through my personal and professional journey. Clarity about fundamental values, respect for legitimate capabilities regardless of source, willingness to make difficult decisions while acknowledging their impact on others. The monthly executive committee meeting arrived just as these initial leadership tests were beginning to coalesce into recognizable patterns. Seated at the conference table among Horizon's senior leadership, positions I had observed from a distance, for years, I experienced a moment of quiet recognition. I belonged here not because of extraordinary talent or fortunate circumstances, but because consistent, purposeful growth had prepared me for this level of contribution. "Marketing update," the CEO announced, turning to me with the expectation of concise, strategic insight rather than detailed tactical reporting. I outlined our departmental focus with the balanced confidence that had emerged from my recent experiences. "We're advancing 3 key initiatives this quarter: integrating advanced analytics into creative development processes, establishing consistent client experience standards across account teams, and developing specialized vertical expertise in healthcare and financial services sectors." The discussion that followed demonstrated how thoroughly my perspective had evolved from my early career orientation, where once I might have emphasized hours worked, tasks completed, or explicit achievements, I now focused on strategic impacts, team capabilities, and client outcomes, the substantive measures of leadership effectiveness rather than personal performance metrics. After the meeting, Bernard Kelly, our Chief Operating Officer known for his gruff directness, offered an observation that caught me by surprise. "You've settled into the director role more quickly than anyone expected, Matthews. No tentative transition period, no obvious insecurity. It's refreshing." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the assessment without either false modesty or excessive pride. "The learning curve is steep, but the foundation was already in place through my previous roles." He nodded approvingly. "Most people who advance quickly spend their first months trying to justify their promotion or imitate their predecessors. You've done neither." His observation illuminated something I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. My leadership approach wasn't constructed from external models or compensatory performances, but emerged organically from hard-won self-knowledge and professional clarity. The authenticity that had developed through confronting family patterns was manifesting in my executive presence, a congruence between internal values and external expression that others recognized even before I had consciously named it. This evolving professional confidence intersected with continuing personal growth in unexpected ways. My mother's proposed celebration dinner materialized as a small gathering at my parents' home, an event that would have once filled me with anticipation of subtle comparisons and qualified recognition, but now represented an opportunity to engage from a place of secure self-definition rather than defensive achievement. Arriving at their house, I noticed thoughtful details that suggested genuine consideration of my preferences rather than perfunctory hospitality. A selection of books by authors I had mentioned enjoying, photographs from significant moments in my educational and professional journey displayed alongside family images, wine I had once mentioned appreciating during a previous dinner. "We wanted to create a celebration that truly honored you," my mother explained as she welcomed me. "Not just your professional achievement, which is certainly worthy of recognition, but who you are as a person." The guest list revealed similar attentiveness. My friend Alexis, who had supported me through years of multiple jobs and limited resources. 2 former colleagues who had mentored me early in my career. And surprisingly, Jason, whose presence carried the complexities of our evolving sibling relationship. My brother approached as I accepted a glass of champagne, his demeanor carrying none of the competitive edge or performative charm that had characterized our previous interactions. "Congratulations on the promotion," he said, extending his hand, with surprising formality. "Marketing director at your age is incredible." "Thank you," I replied, studying him with genuine curiosity. "I hear you've started at Brennan Digital. How's that experience unfolding?" Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of authentic engagement replacing the practiced responses that had typically characterized our exchanges. Humbling, to be honest. I'm discovering how much foundational knowledge I missed by always focusing on the exciting creative elements without understanding the strategic underpinnings. His candor invited mine. That's a significant realization. What prompted it? He considered the question with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. "Partly watching you build your career so methodically, partly hitting the financial wall when Mom and Dad finally stopped covering my bills, but mostly realizing that all my big ideas never materialized into anything concrete because I wasn't willing to engage with the unglamorous work that transforms concepts into reality." The insight demonstrated self-awareness I hadn't previously observed in him. That's a valuable perspective to develop, regardless of when it happens. "Andrea, my manager at Brennan, has been surprisingly patient with my learning curve," he continued. "She mentioned your conversation with her made a difference in how they're approaching my development. I wanted to thank you for that." "I simply offered an honest assessment," I replied, neither diminishing the contribution nor overstating its significance. "The opportunity is yours to develop however you choose." Our conversation was interrupted by my father tapping a glass to gather everyone's attention. "Before dinner, I'd like to offer a toast to Rachel," he announced, his expression carrying a gravity I rarely associated with family gatherings. Not just for her promotion to marketing director, impressive as that achievement is, but for the qualities that have defined her professional journey. Persistence that transformed early setbacks into stepping stones, integrity that never sacrificed values for advancement, and courage to establish truths that some of us, his glance included my mother and Jason, weren't always ready to hear. He raised his glass, meeting my gaze directly. To Rachel, who succeeded not despite challenges but through them, transforming every obstacle into an opportunity for growth. The acknowledgement, specific, substantive, and free from comparative qualifications, represented the recognition I had once desperately sought but now received with quiet appreciation rather than validation-seeking hunger. My path to professional, leadership, and personal authenticity hadn't required their recognition to be valid, but their willingness to see me clearly added a dimension of healing to achievement that stood secure on its own foundation. dinner conversation flowed with surprising ease. Genuine exchanges about meaningful topics rather than performative updates or superficial pleasantries. My parents asked thoughtful questions about my leadership philosophy and professional vision, demonstrating interest in the substance of my work, rather than merely its status implications. Jason shared insights from his entry-level position with self-deprecating humor, rather than the exaggerated importance that had previously characterized his career narratives. Alexis, observing these family dynamics with the perspective of someone who had witnessed my struggles through years of multiple jobs and limited recognition, whispered an observation as we moved from dining room to living room. "This is surreal. They're actually seeing you, not just what you've accomplished, but who you are. What changed?" The question invited reflection on the transformation that had unfolded since my promotion had triggered the confrontation at Luciano's. "I changed. First," I replied after careful consideration. "When I stopped seeking validation and started requiring respect, it created space for them to recognize patterns they couldn't see while I was still participating in them. And you didn't have to sacrifice professional success to make that happen," she noted. "Quite the opposite." Her observation crystallized something fundamental about my journey. The professional advancement that had initially seemed separate from personal growth had actually been integrally connected to it. By establishing healthier boundaries in family relationships, I had freed energy previously consumed by validation seeking and redirected it toward authentic contribution and leadership presence. The celebration continued with moments of genuine connection I would have considered impossible mere months earlier. My mother sharing stories of her own early career ambitions before family priorities had redirected her path. My father acknowledging how his achievement-oriented parenting had emphasized different standards for Jason and me, with consequences he was only now recognizing. Jason expressing genuine curiosity about my leadership challenges rather than dismissing corporate environments as inherently soulless. When guests began departing, I found myself lingering, engaged in conversation with my parents that contained none of the performative elements or defensive positioning that had characterized our previous interactions. We were simply three adults, sharing perspectives shaped by distinct experiences, connected by family bonds, but relating through authentic engagement rather than prescribed roles. "This evening meant a great deal to us," my mother said as I prepared to leave. "Not just the opportunity to celebrate your achievement, but the chance to participate in your life in a way that feels genuine rather than performative." "The journey isn't complete," my father added with uncharacteristic philosophical awareness. "Patterns established over decades don't transform overnight, but I hope you've seen our genuine commitment to change." I acknowledged their efforts with measured appreciation, neither dismissing the significance of their evolution nor suggesting that a single celebration had erased years of complex dynamics. "I have, and I value it. This is unfamiliar territory for all of us. But there's something meaningful in navigating it together rather than maintaining comfortable illusions that serve none of us well." Driving home afterward, I reflected on the multidimensional transformation the past months had brought. How professional advancement had catalyzed personal growth, how establishing boundaries had created space for authentic connection, how facing difficult truths had ultimately yielded more genuine relationships than maintaining comfortable fictions. The following morning, I arrived at the office with renewed clarity about the leadership approach I wanted to establish as marketing director. The previous weeks had demonstrated that authentic presence, neither artificially authoritative nor insecurely accommodating, created the foundation for both effective team performance and meaningful professional relationships. Gabriella greeted me with her characteristic efficiency, outlining the day's priorities while providing updates on ongoing projects. As she concluded her briefing, she hesitated momentarily before offering an observation. "The department feels different under your leadership, more focused, but also more collaborative. People are bringing their best work because they know you'll recognize genuine value while maintaining clear standards." Her assessment aligned precisely with the leadership philosophy I had been crystallizing, one that honored substantive contribution regardless of source while establishing consistent expectations aligned with strategic priorities. This approach wasn't constructed from leadership theories or imitated from previous managers, but emerged organically from the personal growth that had transformed my relationship with achievement and recognition. As I settled at my desk to prepare for the day's executive committee meeting, my phone chimed with a notification from the professional networking platform I maintained, but rarely actively engaged with. Opening the message, I discovered a connection. Request from Andrea Carr at Brennan Digital, accompanied by a brief note. Your brother mentioned your recent promotion to marketing director. Impressive accomplishment at your career stage. I've been intrigued by Horizon's innovative approach to healthcare marketing. Would welcome the opportunity to discuss potential collaboration between our firms on complementary client needs. The message represented an unexpected professional synchronicity emerging from personal growth. How addressing family dynamics had created pathways for Jason's development, which in turn had generated potential business opportunities aligned with my professional direction. The connections weren't orchestrated or manipulated, but unfolded organically from approaching both personal and professional realms with authenticity rather than strategic calculation. I responded to Andrea's message with genuine openness to exploration rather than immediate strategic positioning, the approach that increasingly characterized my professional interactions at all levels. This orientation toward authentic engagement, rather than performative achievement, had transformed not just how I experienced success, but how I defined it. Not as external validation or comparative advantage, but as the alignment of capabilities with contribution, values with actions, potential with purpose. The journey from working multiple jobs while struggling for recognition to leading from a place of genuine authority and authentic presence hadn't followed a predictable trajectory. The catalyst for transformation had come not through carefully constructed career strategies, but through the courage to confront limiting patterns and establish boundaries based on self-respect rather than external validation. As I prepared for the day's leadership responsibilities, I carried this essential insight. True success emerges not from proving worth to others, but from recognizing it within yourself, and requiring that recognition from those who wish to participate in your journey, whether family members, colleagues, or the broader professional world. The promotion had changed everything not because of its external trappings, but because it had created the catalyst for internal transformation that redefined success itself. 6 months into my role as marketing director, a new opportunity emerged that would test both my professional capabilities and personal growth. Daniel called me into his office on a Tuesday afternoon, his expression carrying the focused intensity I'd come to recognize as his approach to significant business matters. Horizon International is exploring acquisition opportunities, he began without preamble. Specifically, we're evaluating 3 boutique agencies with specialized expertise in emerging markets. The executive team wants comprehensive due diligence on these potential targets, focusing particularly on cultural alignment and strategic synergy beyond the obvious financial metrics. I nodded, anticipating where this was leading. You need marketing perspective on brand compatibility and client portfolio integration. More than that, he clarified. We need someone to lead the entire evaluation process, interfacing with our financial team on valuation models, working with HR on organizational structure implications, and ultimately making recommendations to the board about which acquisition, if any, best supports our growth strategy. The assignment represented a significant expansion beyond my departmental leadership responsibilities, a cross-functional strategic initiative with direct board visibility. Timeline? I asked, mentally cataloging the current marketing projects. That would need reorganization to accommodate this priority. Accelerated. 4 weeks to preliminary assessment, 8 weeks to final recommendation. The competitive landscape is shifting rapidly, and we need to move decisively if we're going to secure the right partnership. I'll need to redistribute some departmental responsibilities to create capacity for this, I noted, already formulating an approach that would leverage team strengths while maintaining momentum on critical marketing initiatives. Daniel nodded, approvingly. That's precisely why you're the right person for this assignment. You understand both the strategic importance of this evaluation and the operational realities of maintaining core business functions while pursuing growth opportunities. As I left his office, the significance of this assignment took clearer shape in my mind. This wasn't simply a project to be managed efficiently, it was an opportunity to demonstrate strategic thinking at the enterprise level, evaluating not just marketing compatibility, but comprehensive business alignment across multiple dimensions. The board's willingness to entrust this evaluation to someone 6 months into a director role rather than assigning it to a more senior executive signaled confidence in my judgment beyond functional expertise. The following morning, I convened a meeting with my leadership team to redistribute departmental responsibilities. Cameron Reed, whose initial resistance to my leadership had evolved into a productive professional relationship, would assume oversight of our largest client relationships. Maya Chen, our data analytics lead, would temporarily report directly to Daniel for strategic guidance while maintaining day-to-day collaboration with marketing teams. Other responsibilities were carefully allocated to ensure both continuity of operations and appropriate development opportunities for team members. This temporary restructuring serves two important purposes, I explained as we reviewed the revised organizational chart. It maintains momentum on critical marketing initiatives while creating capacity for me to lead the acquisition evaluation. Equally important, it provides each of you with expanded responsibilities that align with your development paths. The approach reflected my evolving leadership philosophy, viewing organizational needs not as separate from individual growth, but as complementary dimensions that could reinforce each other when thoughtfully aligned. By framing the restructuring as both an operational necessity and a development opportunity, I transformed what could have been perceived as additional burden into a chance for professional advancement. Cameron, who had initially challenged my leadership through creative defiance, now nodded with something approaching respect. Makes sense. I've been wanting more client strategy involvement beyond creative execution. This gives me that opportunity while supporting the bigger corporate initiative. The first phase of the acquisition evaluation involved intensive review of proprietary information shared under confidentiality agreements with the 3 target agencies. Sequestered in a secure conference room with Marcus Walsh from Finance and Elaine Patel from Legal, I spent days analyzing client portfolios, creative approaches, team structures, and market positioning for each potential acquisition. The traditional approach to such evaluations typically emphasized quantitative metrics, revenue projections, client retention statistics, operational efficiency ratios. While these data points provided essential foundation, I found myself drawn to questions that transcended standard due diligence. What creative philosophy guided each agency's work? How did their organizational culture manifest in client relationships? What unique capabilities had they developed that complemented rather than duplicated Horizon's existing strengths? You're approaching this differently than previous acquisition assessments, Marcus observed as we compared notes after a particularly intensive review session. Most evaluators jump straight to financial models and integration efficiencies. You're examining cultural dimensions and capability alignment with equal rigor. The numbers matter, I acknowledged, but they tell only part of the story. We're not just acquiring client contracts and revenue streams. We're potentially integrating creative teams, leadership approaches, and relationship models. Those less tangible elements often determine whether an acquisition achieves its strategic objectives or becomes an expensive distraction. This perspective, balancing quantitative analysis with qualitative understanding, reflected the integrated approach I had developed through my professional journey. Years of working multiple jobs had honed my practical efficiency and resource management. My marketing expertise provided strategic market perspective. And perhaps most significantly, my personal growth through family dynamics had deepened my understanding of how relationships and unspoken expectations shaped organizational behavior beyond formal structures. As the evaluation progressed to site, visits, and leadership interviews, this multidimensional perspective proved increasingly valuable. At Meridian Creative, the first potential acquisition target, impressive financial performance masked significant cultural misalignment that became evident only through careful observation of team interactions and client engagement patterns. Their creative work is exceptional, I noted in my assessment report, but their approach to client relationships fundamentally conflicts with Horizon's collaborative model. They position themselves as creative authorities whose expertise shouldn't be questioned, while we view strategic partnership as central to our value proposition. This philosophical divergence would create significant integration challenges despite the apparent portfolio complementarity. The second target, Nexus Digital, presented different considerations. Their financial metrics lagged behind Meridian's, but their organizational culture and strategic orientation aligned closely with Horizon's evolution toward data-informed creative development. Their leadership team demonstrated transparent communication, distributed decision-making, and genuine investment in team development, qualities that would integrate well with our approach. The third candidate, Eastward Strategy, occupied an intriguing middle position. Financially stable with moderate growth, culturally compatible in most dimensions, but strategically focused on market segments tangential to Horizon's core strengths. Their Asia-Pacific expertise offered geographic expansion potential, but their industry specializations only partially overlapped with our strategic growth priorities. As the 8-week evaluation period concluded, I prepared comprehensive recommendations for the executive committee and board review. Rather than advocating for a single obvious choice, I presented a nuanced analysis, acknowledging different strategic priorities might suggest different acquisition targets. If immediate financial performance is our primary consideration, Meridian offers the strongest metrics, I explained during the executive presentation. However, their cultural approach to client relationships would require significant modification to align with Horizon's partnership model, creating integration risks that could undermine projected financial benefits. I continued with balanced assessment of each option, concluding with a recommendation that prioritized long-term strategic alignment over short-term financial gains. Based on comprehensive evaluation across financial, operational, cultural, and strategic dimensions, I recommend pursuing acquisition of Nexus Digital. While their current financial performance trails Meridian's, their organizational culture and capabilities complement Horizon's evolution toward data-informed creative strategy. With appropriate integration planning, this partnership offers the strongest foundation for sustainable growth aligned with our long-term vision. The presentation generated thoughtful discussion among executive leaders, with different functional perspectives emphasizing various elements of my analysis. Throughout the exchange, I maintained balanced engagement, neither defensively protecting my recommendation nor passively deferring to more senior executives. This approach reflected my growing comfort with leadership presence that balanced confidence in well-researched positions with openness to legitimate alternative perspectives. When the CEO finally spoke, his assessment carried the measured consideration that characterized his leadership style. This evaluation demonstrates exceptional analytical rigor combined with strategic insight. The recommendation balances immediate opportunities against long-term alignment in a way that serves our sustainable growth objectives. I support moving forward with the Nexus acquisition as outlined. The board subsequently approved this direction, authorizing formal acquisition negotiations with Nexus Digital leadership. As I left the boardroom following this decision, Daniel caught up with me in the hallway, his typically reserved demeanor warming with genuine appreciation. "That was masterfully handled," he observed. "You didn't just analyze the options, You helped the entire leadership team understand the multidimensional considerations beyond standard financial metrics. It's exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need at the executive level. His comment carried implications beyond this specific project, suggesting possibilities for further advancement that I received with balanced perspective, appreciating the recognition without allowing it to define my professional identity or satisfaction. The integration planning phase that followed the acquisition approval brought new challenges and learning opportunities. I was appointed to lead the integration team, working directly with Nexus leadership to create a thoughtful transition that preserved their unique capabilities while incorporating them into Horizon's broader organization. My approach emphasized transparent communication, shared decision-making, and explicit recognition of the strengths each organization brought to the partnership. Rather than imposing Horizon's processes on the acquired team, we created collaborative working groups to identify best practices from both organizations that could be adopted in the integrated structure. "This doesn't feel like a typical acquisition," remarked Sophia Lin, Nexus's founder and creative director, during one of our integration planning sessions. "Usually the acquiring company simply absorbs the smaller firm into their existing systems, regardless of what might be lost in the process. You're genuinely seeking to preserve what makes us unique while creating something stronger together." Her observation highlighted how my leadership approach had evolved from my earlier experiences, both professional and personal. The painful dynamics of seeking recognition within my family had sensitized me to the importance of genuine acknowledgement rather than hierarchical imposition. My journey through multiple jobs had taught me that effective integration of diverse capabilities required respect for different contributions rather than rigid conformity to predetermined structures. As the integration process advanced, I maintained regular communication with my marketing team, ensuring they remained connected to both departmental priorities and the broader organizational evolution represented by this acquisition. Regular update sessions provided transparency about how the integration would affect their work, while also creating opportunities to incorporate their perspectives into implementation decisions. This balanced approach, maintaining strategic focus while attending to relationship dynamics and practical implementation challenges, characterized my evolving leadership style. Rather than compartmentalizing these dimensions or prioritizing one at the expense of others, I integrated them into a coherent approach that addressed multiple facets of organizational effectiveness simultaneously. The successful acquisition and initial integration phases generated positive attention throughout Horizon International. Client responses were enthusiastic, team engagement metrics showed strong alignment, and early collaboration between Horizon and Nexus teams produced innovative approaches that neither organization would likely have developed independently. 3. Months after the acquisition closed, I received another unexpected communication from Mira, who had been observing these developments from her position in the London office. "The acquisition integration has been impressive to watch from across the Atlantic," she wrote. "Word travels quickly through global leadership channels, and the board has taken particular notice of how you've managed both strategic and cultural dimensions of this complex process. I thought you should know that your name is being mentioned in discussions about expanded leadership opportunities as our European operations continue growing." The message suggested possibilities for international experience that would further broaden my professional development beyond the significant growth I had already experienced. While such opportunities would once have triggered immediate anxiety about proving worthy of consideration, I now received this information with balanced perspective, appreciating the recognition while maintaining focus on current responsibilities rather than fixating on potential future advancement. This shift in orientation, from achievement-seeking to purpose-driven contribution, represented perhaps the most significant transformation in my professional journey. No longer was I working to prove my value through accumulated accomplishments or comparative advancement. Instead, I was engaged in meaningful work aligned with both organizational objectives and personal values, allowing recognition to emerge naturally from authentic contribution rather than pursuing it as primary motivation. The contrast with my earlier years, working multiple jobs while receiving minimal recognition for extraordinary effort, couldn't have been starker. Yet I recognized that those challenging experiences had developed capabilities and perspectives that now informed my leadership approach. Resilience that sustained me through complex challenges, resourcefulness that helped me navigate limited resources, and perhaps most importantly, authentic self-valuation that no longer depended on external validation. During a weekend visit with my parents, this evolution became unexpectedly clear through my father's observation as we discussed the acquisition project over dinner. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his expression thoughtful rather than evaluative. "You mentioned that leading this acquisition was especially meaningful because it integrated multiple dimensions of organizational effectiveness: financial, operational, cultural. That integrated perspective seems central to your leadership approach generally." I nodded, appreciating his thoughtful engagement with the substance of my work rather than merely its status implications. Integration is essential for sustainable results. Financial metrics matter, but they're meaningless without cultural alignment. Strategic vision is critical, but it fails without operational execution. These dimensions aren't separate considerations. They're interconnected facets of organizational effectiveness. "I wonder," he continued with genuine curiosity, "if that integrated perspective developed partly through your experience working multiple jobs simultaneously during those early career years. You were constantly balancing different organizational cultures, diverse skill requirements, varying leadership expectations, all while maintaining coherent professional identity across those contexts." His insight surprised me, not just for its perceptiveness, but for the implicit acknowledgement that the very circumstances they had once dismissed as unfortunate necessity had actually contributed valuable perspective to my professional development. Rather than positioning my early career struggles as regrettable detours from a preferred path, he was recognizing their potential contribution to my current capabilities. "That's an interesting perspective," I acknowledged. "Those years were challenging in many ways, but they did develop capabilities I draw on regularly now, especially the ability to navigate different organizational contexts while maintaining consistent professional standards." My mother joined the conversation with her own observation. "What strikes me is how you've integrated professional achievement with personal authenticity. You've advanced rapidly without sacrificing your values or adopting artificial personas to meet others' expectations. That's remarkably rare, especially at executive levels." Their observations reflected genuine engagement with my professional journey rather than comparative evaluation or qualified recognition. They were seeing me, not as the daughter whose achievements needed measuring against predetermined standards, but as a professional whose approach carried distinctive strengths worthy of thoughtful consideration. This evolution in our relationship paralleled my own internal transformation, from seeking validation through achievement to engaging authentically with meaningful work. Just as I no longer organized my professional identity around proving worth through accumulated accomplishments, they were no longer relating to my career through evaluative frameworks that measured success against external standards. The journey that had begun with working multiple jobs while receiving minimal recognition had evolved through confronting family dynamics, establishing healthier boundaries, advancing to leadership positions, and ultimately developing an integrated approach to both professional contribution and personal relationships. Each phase had built upon previous learning, creating not a linear progression toward predetermined success, but an evolving integration of capability, purpose, and authentic presence. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the distance traveled from those exhausting early career days, not just in professional position or financial security, but in fundamental relationship with achievement and recognition. The promotion, that had catalyzed confrontation with long-standing family patterns had indeed changed everything, though not in ways anyone could have predicted. The transformation wasn't about ascending hierarchical structures or accumulating impressive titles, but about aligning external circumstances with internal values, creating congruence between who I was and how I engaged with both professional responsibilities and personal relationships. This alignment generated not just more effective leadership, but deeper satisfaction. The quiet confidence that comes not from proving worth to others, but from contributing authentically from a center of self-knowledge and purpose. The expanding horizons before me, whether international opportunities, executive advancement, or continued growth in current responsibilities, represented not destinations to pursue for validation, but potential contexts for continued authentic contribution. The real achievement wasn't in reaching particular positions, but in developing the integrated perspective that allowed meaningful engagement with whatever opportunities emerged. This realization brought a sense of liberation from achievement seeking, patterns that had once dominated my approach to both career and family relationships. The future held abundant possibilities, but their value would be determined not by status or recognition they might bring, but by alignment with authentic purpose and contribution. The true measure of meaningful achievement beyond external metrics, or comparative evaluation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.